Joining us today is Alan Feld. Alan is a managing partner at Vintage Investment Partners. And one thing I must put on the table right from the start, Alan and I are old friends. We've known each other for 13 years. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure.
So I want you to share with us and the audience just a little bit about your family background, where you're from, just like your journey to Israel and a little bit of the history.
So I grew up in Toronto, born in Canada, and moved here in 1994, so 27 years ago. Zionism. I fell in love with the country when I came here for the first time when I was 11, and always knew that I wanted to move here. And fortunately married an amazing person who also had a very similar dream, and we moved together with our then 6-month-old daughter to Israel, and it's been an amazing experience since.
You grew up in a house that is very, the spirit of volunteerism is what you were educated on. Your mother was very active in the Syrian refugee.
My mother and my late father. My late father had a patient who was a young woman who had escaped, a young Jewish woman who had escaped from Syria. And the first time she tried to escape, she was very badly tortured. My father said, "What's going on? There's got to, I've never heard that there are Jews left in Syria." And my, pure Ashkenazi parents said, "This is crazy. Nobody's doing anything about this 5,000 person community."
Amazing.
And they started an initiative that after my father passed away in 1973, my mother continued, that eventually led to her essentially buying out over 3,000 Jews out of Syria, of the 5,000 person Jewish community.
Wow.
So I grew up in in an environment which was, you felt an obligation to do something
back,
for somebody else. And so with the Syrian jury effort, I played a very minor role, organizing demonstrations and fundraising and other stuff. Was involved in the Soviet jury movement as well. And then when I was in university, I was the vice chairman of the Canadian Jewish Congress, which was the umbrella organization of the Canadian Jewish community. And then after that, I moved to Israel. And then got involved in a bunch of things here.
So you've been doing a lot of philanthropic activity and social activity. Recently, you started an initiative called Power and Diversity. Can you tell us a little bit about why and also what is the initiative?
Sure. There were two very important influences on me personally in Israel and the way I look at this country. One was the President Rivlin's very powerful speech about the 4 tribes. How this country was basically being cantonized by sort of people pulling it apart and pulling in different directions, and we weren't finding a common ethos. A second thing that had a very big influence was reading several of the books of the late and I believe great former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who particularly wrote a book that I found was very powerful called The Home We Build Together. And basically he wrote it after the British equivalent of 9/11.
Yeah.
And his vision was, or what he was trying to do is, how do we find a common ethos to take people from disparate communities and try and bring them together. And he had a very interesting concept. He said we have to move from a social contract where everybody thinks about what they get to a social covenant, which is what am I contributing toward a common goal.
Yeah.
And when I applied that approach to Israel, in a country where people are living separately, we're studying separately, not everybody serves in the army, there isn't a notional place where everybody in society meets and is working toward a common goal, except for one place, and that's the workforce. So if you could get people from multiple communities working together in for the success, hopefully, of the company they're working for, it ceases to be my enemy or this other person, is my friend from work.
Yeah.
We started that at Vintage, and I'm proud that we are a very diverse community of people, men, women, people from the Arab Israeli community, from the LGBT community, etc. But beyond that, I think what we try to do was get other venture funds to think in those terms, and then most importantly, to get startups to think in those terms, where not only, and the evidence shows this, not only does diversity or diverse approaches make the company a better place, it also is not just a smart thing to do, it's the right thing to do, because you're also enabling and empowering people from different communities in essentially what is the driver of the Israeli economy.
Yes.
So today we have almost 170 startups involved, 60 venture funds, and what we're trying to do is, as I say, give companies the tools to recruit people from different communities, to advance them within their companies, to help create a sense of we, despite the fact that people are from different communities. And so far it's gone great. The companies see themselves as better for it, and we continue to expand the effort. So my partners and I decided to provide both the seed funding, and we've been giving a good chunk of the ongoing funding for this. And our hope is that we can scale this in a way that we can have a big influence on Israel going forward. Now, by the way, you see this kind of interaction in the healthcare community, right? You see, people from the Arab Israeli community in very senior positions in hospitals, etc.
Yes.
If we could do the same thing with people from the Ethiopian community, from the Haredi community, from the Arab Israeli community, from people with physical or mental challenges, the potential of the driver of the Israeli economy being the unifier could have an enormous effect on the whole country as a whole. So that's what we've been spending our time on.
I think it's really important that you found a way to combine your philanthropic aspiration and your values with the day-to-day work life and also the things that your leadership within the VC world together with your leadership in the social world. So it's pretty amazing.
Well, I try to do my best to separate out my
your business and your
activity and my
definitely.
philanthropic stuff. But what I came to see was that through the work I had done, I had seen this this problem, this issue of inequality and particularly inequality of opportunity. And if the largest sector or the driver, I shouldn't say the largest sector because it's not, but the driver of the economy, it doesn't facilitate equality of opportunity, then what do we do beyond that? Having said all that, I think there's enormous opportunities in the philanthropic side not to wait until we get to the workforce, but to look at what do we do to the education system, that we're already at the education level start creating these interactions between people that are not at the other end of a weapon, but in a positive and hopefully unifying environment. And so we see ourselves as almost
in different things that you do with your family philanthropy.
Absolutely. Another area that we're quite active on through our foundation that we set up through Keshet is, while we're personally Orthodox, we believe that it's extremely important for this country that the Judaism be much more encompassing and much more open, and that we that everybody find their right place. I think the biggest threat to Judaism in the state of Israel actually is the legislation that forces people to do certain things. Jews never react well to being forced to do anything.
Being forced, yes.
And if we can have a Judaism that's much more embracing and more positive and is respectful of where people want to be on that scale, I think this country could also be a different country. And by the way, it goes, as far as I'm concerned, it goes to the same approach, which is it's another kind of diversity.
Yes.
Yes. And I think Judaism would be a stronger would be far stronger in Israel had we had more diverse approach to Judaism in this country.
I totally agree. So we've known each other for 13 years because 13 years ago you helped me found Jewish Founders Network in Israel.
That's
and
right.
also when we started Keshet, you were the first one to open your family foundation through Keshet. Can you tell the audience a little bit about why is this a good mechanism for you? Why do you think it's good for philanthropy in Israel?
Sure. So, I think it's extremely important that Israelis start becoming far more active in philanthropy, and we're Israelis. Look, very correctly so. People from abroad who are making donations here are saying this is this high-tech revolution that's going on in Israel. They're seeing all the money that's being created, and they're saying, wait a minute, why are we funding social change or religious institutions or
health,
education,
yes.
etc.? And they're asking that question correctly. We as Israelis have an obligation to be, at the very least, be contributing to this process. And so, number one, I think it's again the right thing to do. Unfortunately, historically, the tax system in Israel was not particularly supportive of creating foundations in this country, and I think Keshet was a breakthrough. It really does enable you to time your giving to your economic performance, but yet from a tax perspective, but not time your giving vis-a-vis the need.
Yes.
And that I think is beside being a hugely attractive thing is I think extremely important to the idea of starting foundations. The other thing is the cost of starting a foundation here is enormous, and the ease with which Leona, my wife, and I started Keshet was mind-boggling. I mean, we set it up within a day.
Yes.
In fact, I remember we set it up. I think it was like a year
overnight.
ago.
Yes.
Overnight, literally, because it was toward the end of the year. We wanted to make a bunch of donations before year end, and it was amazing process. And since, frankly, just to transfer money and to do it's been incredibly efficient and effective, and I think it's an amazing project, and I think it's a game changer in Israel. Because it's so easy now to do that I don't think anybody has an excuse not to do it. Now the big question mark, of course, is tax limitations and the cap that you can have at certain points.
As we're working to change, yes.
Yeah, hopefully that will change. I think the government should realize how wonderful this project is, and I think if should they change that, I think this is going to become. Well, already I think is becoming a major a breakthrough, but I think it can even become a spectacular breakthrough and fundamentally change the landscape in Israel.
So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
It's really a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Any last words of wisdom or message?
Words of wisdom. I never have any words of wisdom if you ask my children. If you ask my children, but look. I think it's our turn to step up as Israelis. We've gotten a easy ride to this point, at least in the area of philanthropy. We have a responsibility to make this a better place and not just assume that everybody else is going to finance it. And we have a responsibility and an obligation to be paying our fair share of building this and building this country, and I believe that it's time that we do it. And I think the great and the breakthrough that Keshet represents is it just makes it very easy to do that.
Thank you, Alan, for sharing your philanthropic journey with us and for choosing Keshet as your family foundation platform. And thank you for listening and watching, and we hope to see you in our next episode.
Thank you.